Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to look at creating something like this, which is just a cylinder with holes in there. But this is a similar kind of technique to if you were approaching some of these objects. So we have this rifle where we've got these holes or these cutouts in there, in the barrel there, this grill, this chain link fence. We have this, which is a grill from the front of a car. This sort of muffler, again a car grill, and these kind of objects as well. But what I'm doing with this is looking at making it low poly. So this is actually just a simple cylinder, 16 sides, really low poly, with actually no holes in. So it's a solid object. And if I just move this out to the side, I'm just going to switch this off. Essentially, that's where it comes from. Okay, that's the kind of thing we've got. Let's put the holes back on there. You can see how that works. So let's look at creating this. I'm going to go into Maya, and this is one I've already made. So let's just start out and let's create this. So I'm just going to save this to File, New Scene, and we'll start from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cylinder. I'm using a lot of shortcuts here. So for my students who know me, they know I use a lot of shortcuts to get to access different things. If you're starting out, then you can use the different menus up here. So create, I'm going to go polygon primitives, and there is cylinder. What I'm going to do is just shift right click and get to cylinder here instead. Okay, I'm going to press T, shortcut T key, and then I'm going to go in and just set a few things here. So I'm going to set 10 centimeters radius. I'm going to set a height of 20, and I'll set subdivisions of 16. Then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate this. So press E, and I'm going to use the J key to snap this rotation wise. You could also just go into your channel box and type in 90 on the rotate X. We have a similar kind of thing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the caps. So we'll get, again, quick ways to do this. I'm going to grab these two verts. I'm going to do a Control F11, which is also, if we do select and we do convert selection to faces, that Control 11 there, that's what that does. So I prefer to get those vertices, Control F11. That gets those two. I'm just going to press delete. There. So that's my shape. And actually, I'm just going to stretch this out. And just, no, I'll leave it at that. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. So that's my basic shape. So essentially that is the final object that we would take into the game engine, just like that. So to make my more complex pattern, I'm going to start off, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this out flat to make it easier for myself. I could go in multi-cut and start creating the shapes and do it that way. I'm going to do it a different kind of way just to show you another technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of these faces. I'm going to extract this. So again, I'm using shortcuts. All of these are in this edit mesh menu. We have this extract here. We're also going to use a, in fact, we're going to use a duplicate for this. So I prefer to shift right click and get to my duplicate there. I just find it better to use those shortcuts. I'm going to grab that, just pull it off to one side. So I have that as my starting point. I'm going to move my pivot point. So we can use our modeling toolkit and go into edit pivot and go into our snap to points, and I can just move that up just to line with that vertex there. But again, I prefer to do the shortcut ways, so let's just hide that. Let's click that off. So I can use a D key. So the D key will activate the pivot point, the V key will activate my snap, and then I can just drag that up to over to this vertex point, so that's there. So with that there, I'm going to snap this down to the grid just to make it easy if I want to start to line things up. And if I just press space here, I'll just snap that in, and I'm actually going to snap to this point. So there we've got that. So what I'm going to do with this is I want to make this as a flat shape. If I just drag this up, however, if I just get this vertex point, and if I press X now, snap to grid, and just drag that up, it's not going to be exactly the same size because of the angle on this in the first instance. So actually, to prove that, I'm going to go in. I'm just going to zoom in on this. I'm going to just go into my wireframe unshaded. Alt F or Alt 5 is now the shortcut for that. Into that. I'm going to go to my create, and we've got these measure tools, and I'm going to use this distance tool. So I'm just going to zoom in on this a little bit. I'm going to use my snap tool again, snap to verts, or snap to points. I'm going to click there and there, and that's going to snap these 2 point helpers to each of those verts, and that's going to give me a measurement. So this measurement 3.901807. Okay, that's the measurement that we're working with. What I'll do is I'm just going to make a note of that. Okay. And then I'm just going to, just to show you the difference in this, if I grab this now, grab this vertex point, just use my snap to grid, so press X down, just drag that up to the grid line. My point helper for this is in the right place. If I grab this point helper, V, snap to that point. So you can see what we had before was 3.901807, and this now is shorter. The angle will add the extra bit of length on that, so I want it to be exactly the same length as one of these polys. So now that I've got that, what I can do is I'm just going to grab this and just delete this. I can delete these point helpers. I'm going to do a shift right click, just making sure I've not selected everything. Shift right click. I'm going to create a plane object. And again, I can do that, create polygon primitives and do plane. I'm going to press T again. Just going to set my subdivisions to 1 by 1 initially. And then we can set the width of this. And this is going to be my measurement. So it's 3.901. Just check my piece of paper. 807. It's not giving me the exact thing, but 9018. So if I do 902, should be a good enough. And width for now, I'll just put to 20. I'm going to remeasure this. So what I can do is grab this. I'm going to have it the same length as this here, because this is going to be my low poly model. I'm currently modeling my high poly model. So V, snap to this vert, grab these, V, snap to that vert, making sure I'm only on that one axis. And that's my starting point for my new cylinder with holes in. So let's now grab this. I'm going to go into edge mode and select these 2 edges. I'm going to do a connect on this. So again, shift right click. We can do a connect tool, which is also under edit mesh connect. I'm going to go into my tool settings. So I can just go in here and change this value to whatever I want it to be. Actually, I think 8 is about right just for that. I could try to make them more square, but to be honest, it doesn't really make that much of it. It's not that much of an issue, so 8's fine. You might have a specific measurement that you want. So we've got that. Go to delete history, Alt Shift D, or edit, delete by type, history. Really useful shortcut. And now I'm going to grab one of these faces. I'm going to do a Control E for an extrude. Or we can do it from the modeling toolkit, or we can do it from our mesh tools. Edit mesh, extrude. and I'm just going to use the offset. So I'm going to press and hold Control down here, so I can just bring this out in a smaller increment. And again, you can judge whatever size you want from that. So that's fine. I'm going to put a few cuts through this. So I'm going to use my multi-cut. I've actually assigned this to a shortcut key M. Again, we can go to multi-cut from modeling tools there, or from our mesh tools where we have our multi-cut. It's a tool I use a lot, so I've put that onto a shortcut. I'm going to use Control. I could also use the Connect tool here as well, but I'll do it this way. So I'm going to use Control and a middle mouse click, which is going to put that right in the center. I'm going to do a Control, middle mouse click to put that right in the center. And the reason I'm doing that is to allow myself to have more edges around here, because I'm going to make this into a circle for our hole. So grab these polys, shift right click, and I'm going to do this Circularized Components, which again is in Edit Mesh, I believe. I've used a shortcut for so long. Could be in... there we go, Circularized. So I've got so used to using the shortcuts. Sometimes I can't find the original tools. But we have that, and I'm just going to do a twist on this. Just to make that pretty straight, and that should be fine. Oops, let's have a look. Yeah, it should be fine. A little more. It's going to be a circle anyway. So I'm going to grab these faces. So what I'm going to do with this, I'm just going to give it a bit of depth so that we can grab a normal map from this. So I can do an extrude again. I'm just going to do a shift, drag down, which is the same as doing an extrude. I'm just going to scale that in. Like that. And then actually I'm going to delete that. Now I'm going to get rid. I'm going to get the kind of hole in a different way. If I start smoothing this, so I'm going to use a smooth preview here to kind of show you what is going to happen. We're going to smooth it out eventually to get a nice circle shape. If I started doing that and keeping that center area, I'd have to mess up by putting loads of cuts in there to get the area that I'm going to use as transparency. So I'm going to do a different technique for this. I am going to tighten this edge up here, so I'm just going to double click on this just to get this edge around there, and I'm going to do a Control B for a bevel and just bring this in a little bit just to tighten that edge up. So I've got that nice edge there as if it's been stamped in. Okay, so just previewing this 3, 1 to go back out. So this was my guide essentially for this. I'm going to make a duplicate of this, Control D to duplicate, edit, duplicate as well. And I'm going to start making my other circle. So I'm going to grab all of this. So sometimes I'll do this in my, I'll kind of make my reference points. Just going to do Alt 5 to bring up my edge faces. And then essentially I'm going to duplicate this a number of times to get it so I've got this length of shape but with the holes all the way through. So I'm going to use my pivot trick again, D and V held down. I'm going to use the middle mouse button just so I can middle mouse drag over there to get straight into this top left hand corner of this. I prefer that sometimes to left click drag in, especially if the pivot's quite far away from it. Just a middle mouse drag. I just find a really nice way of getting that pivot over to something. Take those off, so D and V unclicked now, so I'm back on my normal move tool. I'm going to do a Control D to duplicate. I'm going to hold down V. You see I use this a lot, so snap. I'm just going to move this, so I'm snapping to that vertex point there, so it's perfectly aligned. And then a really nice trick with this now is once I've done Control D to duplicate, I can now do a Shift D, which is, if I go to edit, actually this duplicate with transform. So it takes whatever movement I've just done to this previous duplicate and it just carries it on. So Shift D all the way down. So I've got that exact same length there. So let's grab this now, select all of that, and I'm going to combine this. So mesh combine, or again I can use my shift right click, combine there. And then I'm going to weld all the verts together because these aren't currently selected or currently welded. And I can see that if I double click on one of these, it still stands as a separate object. I want it to all be connected together. So I can go into vertex mode, grab around all these. And again, we can do edit mesh, merge, or again, I can do a shift right click, merge verts, and merge verts. Really low threshold, so it's not welding anything it doesn't need to. There we go. So the last bit of creating this, or actually this kind of custom shape before we make it into a cylinder, I'm going to duplicate this way this time. So I've got these 16 faces around here. Remember, we made that 16 in the first instance. If you make that a different number, 20 or anything else, then that's the number that you need to make to do this. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to do the same trick with a pivot. Control V, move this over here. Control D to duplicate. Oh, sorry, D and V for the snap and pivot. Control D to duplicate. With V pressed down, I'm just going to drag that over. And now I'm going to do Shift D. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There we go. So let's connect all those together. Shift right click, combine. Do the same thing with the vertex points. Get all the vertex points. Shift right click, merge vertices and merge verts. Making sure I don't do a merge verts to center. It does that. So merge verts, merge verts. And there we've got our shape. So I can grab this and I could just press H to hide that, or we could delete that. I'm just going to close my modeling toolkit. And there we go. I'm going to flip this over. So just with my rotation tool, J press down. Let's rotate that 180 degrees. Just so I've now got the bottom face there. And then to make this into a cylinder, really simple trick. I'm going to go into deform, nonlinear, bend. We just need to make sure, so this is the bend line, or the bend deformer. I just need to make sure this is aligned to this object here. So I'm going to rotate that, again pressing J down to angle snap, like that. And a quick way to get to the Bendiform handles, press T. And now we have this handle here that I can bring that up. So I can eyeball that, or actually I can just go over here and I can set this curvature to 180. And that makes a perfect cylinder there. So let's grab that. Let's go into verts and select all our verts again. Let's do one more merge vertices, merge vertices. I'm going to delete the history. I'm going to get rid of this rotation here, so I'm going to do modify freeze transformations. Actually, I'll do that again in a second anyway. And if I just do a smooth preview on that now, you can see I have this really nice shape. Let's just take that off. A really nice high poly shape. So I'm just looking at my polygon count here. If you don't have this up, really useful. Display, heads up display, poly count. So we have this one, we have 16 faces, 32 tries. This one, we have 55,296, 110,592 tries. So you can see the difference between the two objects. Really pretty high poly for the kind of object it is. Really low poly. We can still make this look like this. So let's grab this. I'm going to center the pivot point. So again, let's look at some tricks. Modify center pivot, or I can press D to activate the pivot point. Right click while I've got the pivot point activated and just reset pivot. Then just press D again. All these shortcuts will really speed up your workflow. Let's snap this in. So I'm going to snap this down to the grid. And I'm going to snap this across with X. And that's laying right over the top. Pretty nicely over the top of that. So you can see, because I'd lined, or I'd measured each one of those individual polys or planes, this lines up really nicely. I don't have to resize it or anything. So again, I'll just do that freeze transformations, modify freeze transformations. I've got that to a shortcut as well, Control F. Again, it's something I use a lot. Just going to do a little housekeeping. So with this selected, which is a high poly, layers, I'm going to create layer from selected. Just going to double click on this. I do like to separate these out, so I'm going to click save. Just makes it easier for me to select the individual ones. Let's click on the low poly, do the same, layers, create layer from selected. Low poly, click on save. Just means I can hide these if I need to, or lock them as I need to. And then just before I start thinking about exporting these, I'm just going to take this low poly and let's do the UVs very quickly. So UV editor. Let me just drag this down from my other window. Let's just dock this. Because I've taken the caps off this is quite a simple task to do. So I'm just going to go into my UVs, double click to grab the UVs. And again, I'm using the same shortcuts here. Shift right click. I can get to pretty much all of the menus I ever need to get to within UVs. So shift right click, unfold, unfold. You can also do from the unfold section there. I'm going to grab one of these edges, shift right click and do a straighten shell. Actually, that seems to be a bit weird. So another way to do this is arrange and layout and orient to edges. If it does something weird like it's just done. Let's grab that, shift right click, layout, and I'm going to lay out UVs. So we've got a decent resolution on those. Let's close that down. We are pretty much done with that. All of those are smooth round. I'm going to delete history on that. And I'm going to go File and Export Selection. So I've already exported these. I'll do it again. So let's call this exhaust low, but I'm going to call it exhaust low. Let's call it exhaust tut underscore low. And then I'm going to come back to this in a second, but I'll just initially do it to show you kind of the issue that we've got. So I'm going to take this high poly. I do need to allow this to take this into Substance Painter, which I'm going to do the baking in. I do need to go to Mesh and Smooth. And I'm just going to do one subdivision on that, which should be fine. So we've got that. If I don't do that, I just do it with a smooth preview. It will look like it's okay in Maya, but it won't work in Substance Paint. It'll still be a low poly object. So let's grab that. I'm not going to delete the history on this, just in case I want to take that smooth face off at all. So I can still press T and I can still get rid of that, or we can still click here and set that back to 0. So if I delete history, I won't be able to do that. That'll be baked in. So I'm going to grab that, export selection, exhaust tut, and let's call this high, and export selection. And I would then save the Maya file as well. So let's just make sure we do that. Save scene as to get into bad practices. I'm saving a Maya ASCII. I'm going to call this, in fact, I'll call it exhaust. Tut. So in Substance Painter, so I've got it open already. This is the newer version, the Adobe version of this. Let's just do a file new. I'm going to do it just an Unreal Engine. That's generally what I would be going into. 2K res. Let's select, and let's select our exhaust tut low. Okay, that. Let's just discard that. So there is our low poly version. I'm going to go into texture set, bake mesh maps. I'm going to do this as a 4K just to bake out, just get a bit of better resolution. Let's bring in our high poly version. And I'll probably have to up the distance as well. So let's do that now. Shouldn't have to be too much. Let's do it 2 by 2. And let's just bake that out. Okay. So I've got my normal maps on there. I've got the indentations on there. But we don't really have the thing for the transparency. So I can mess about taking one of these maps. So I've got an ambient occlusion here that I could go over and try to expand that out. And we can use filters and things to do that. But I just find that the way I'm going to do it is a lot quicker, a lot easier to do. So let's go in. Go back into Maya. So I'm just going to open up my low poly again. I'm going to grab this low poly model. I'm going to make a duplicate of it. So Control D. I'm going to add that to this high poly layer. So right click and I can add selected object. So we can just shut that low poly down. Just going to make this a bit smaller. So the way I'm going to do this is with normals. I'm not going to scale it. I'm going to do it with normals instead. This can be a useful trick if you're scaling down something that you want directly inside another object. So with my move tool, I'm going to press W and left click. I'm going to go to axes and normal. I'm going to go into vertices and select, make sure I'm on the right one. Let's go back into object mode. Let's make sure I'm on the low poly there. Go into verts, click. So we get this gizmo instead. So we have the U's and the V's, and then we have this N, which is a normal map. So what I can do is just drag over on that and just push that in a little bit. Oh, I'm going to say I thought I did. I'm just looking where. Oh, it is okay. I'm just checking that there wasn't the other shape on that. So we're just seeing through. If I let me go back to my normal gizmo tool, W, left click, something like object. So you'll see we have that transparency there. So let's just take that out. I've not finished with it yet, but let's just show you how this is working. So export selection. I can export back over my exhaust tut. Let's go high, save that. Go back into Painter. Let's just rebake. Because I've saved over it, I can just bake selected textures again. Okay. So straight away that gives us a nicer result in terms of this. But we still need to get that transparency out there. So really quick and easy. Back into Maya. I'm going to grab this low poly version. And in Maya we can use vertex colors as a color selection. So I'm going to do that. So with that selected, mesh display, apply color, which is in the vertex color section. Go into the settings for this. I've just set this to red. I'm going to apply it. So we have that. Then I'm going to drag around that now. Let's export this one final time. Again, I'm just saving over this high version. Go. Back into Painter. Back into the Bake Mesh Maps. Just need to go into the ID and just change something quickly. So I need to change the color source from material to vertex color. And then we can bake that. So that's our ID just baked. Okay. Let's just go into layers. I'm just going to drag the same material I was using before. Let's just delete this paint layer that was on there. So just to drag a basic material on that initially. We still don't have our holes though. I do need to look at that. Just like a little seam here as well. So I just use triplanar projection on that just to get rid of that seam. I'm not using this as a full substance painter tutorial, just to show this technique. So I need to make a shader within Substance Painter that allows me to have transparency. This basic one doesn't have that. So I'm going to go to Viewport. I'm going to go, Window, Views, and go to the shader settings. Just drag these down. And I'm going to change this PBR Metal Rough. I'm going to change it to this PBR Metal Rough with Alpha Blending. Let's change that over. In texture set settings, I can add the opacity map now. So this wouldn't really do anything unless we're using the right kind of shader. So now I can have that opacity map in there. That's added. It's added to my channels that I can use. I'm going to do this on a different layer. So I'm going to create a new fill layer. I could call this my almost transparency, something like that. If I just select the opacity, so click on these will switch them off. If I just Alt click on that, it will make that active and switch the rest of them off. A quick way to do that, so Alt clicking on anything will just have that one particular channel active. So with that one on, I'm going to take the opacity down. You can see that's made that completely transparent. And then we can make a mask with this now. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to add mask with color selection, which is what we're using the vertex IDs for. Down here we can pick a color. You can just click on this red, and there we go. Works really nicely. And you can do that with a number of different things, objects. So as I said at the start, these kind of objects, this technique will work in a similar kind of way for all of these sort of things. So it's just a case of playing with it. Okay. So I hope that's been useful. That's creating high to low poly workflow and just creating something like an exhaust, a muffler, radiator grill, anything like that.